Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bear Share Show. This is your host, Andre Matoyer, and today I have a very special friend, guest of mine, and that is the awesome Mr. Jake Briscoe. Jake, how are you doing today?
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Excellent.
So, we've been friends for a whole 3 weeks now, right?
Well, I guess that would depend on your definition of friends, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Met you, Denver Pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Kind of a special moment.
Yeah.
And, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew each other previously on social media, as all the Bears typically do. But, yeah, we finally organically got to meet, in fact, which was pretty impressive, I'd say, since most people anymore just meet through hookup apps. So,
Yeah. Definitely met old school.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. And Jake, I will say, has been a joy to get to know over the last 3 weeks. So looking forward to hanging out with you more, for sure. But the reason why I brought you on is because me and you were talking a lot about this, and we know that it's very common just in general with men and in the gay community, but we hear this term thrown around a lot, and that is body dysmorphia, right? And I wanted to start with this because a lot of the root of the issues that we hear is about body dysmorphia, because that's where typically, you're not totally happy with what you look like. But what do you think that means, Jake? Because you have a lot of experience with this as well.
I have a lot of experience with body dysmorphia. I do, actually, unfortunately. Body dysmorphia, if you're looking at it in just the most, let's say, general term, would be a focus on a body part or your overall aesthetic that turns more obsessive, to the point that it may affect mental health, that it can affect social interaction, confidence, and of course it can also affect physicality as well, which we'll probably get into in a little bit as we further the discussion. But yeah, that's kind of what I see body dysmorphia as, and of course there's different layers to body dysmorphia. I think that people don't realize that it is classified as an actual mental illness, right? It's not just a disorder. It's not something to take lightly. It's not something that I think we should really joke about per se.
Sure.
And as I said, there's layers. So there's muscle dysmorphia, which obviously is fairly prevalent within the bear community specifically.
When we're gonna get into that for sure.
Yeah. But there's all kinds of different types of body dysmorphia, and I think that a much larger swath of the population experiences at least some form of that maybe they don't even realize that that's actually what that is.
Absolutely. That's also exactly how I view body dysmorphia, is essentially feeling like obsessive and simply unhappy or unsatisfied with your body. And a lot of times that can cause you to sort of feel like warped as to a sense of reality of what you actually think you look like and how you actually respond to changes in your body. And, we all change through life. That's part of aging and growing, etc. But when we unhealthily obsess about it, that can become an issue because, like you said, it can affect how we interact with people and how we carry ourselves, and it can definitely be a huge problem if we don't eventually learn how to work through those issues. And it's interesting because when we hear about like body stuff or eating disorders, that whole thing, we always associate that with women. But us being gay men, we know that to be not true, right? It's very prevalent with men, even though you might not hear about it traditionally. A lot of men have this, and especially it's common in the gay community. So why do you think it is that women sort of get the notice for this and men don't?
So, to answer that, I think we need to look with a wider lens, look more holistically at the human race, I guess, as a whole, right? If we widen the lens out of just looking at gay men or even the LGBT community and look at it in terms of men versus women, typically women are for sure much more likely to be judged for their appearance than what men are in general.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what can be very prevalent in heteronormative society isn't as prevalent in the LGBT community, but I would say, that we certainly share a lot of similarities with how women are treated, and unfortunately, that's something that we put upon ourselves, right?
Is that because as gay men, like, so like women, straight women are the object of straight men, but they're still the object of men. But gay men
Are still the object of men.
Right? Exactly. So we put some of that same pressure on ourselves, and we mirror some of that what women feel. I think.
Of course, yeah. I mean, look, I don't think that it's fully fair to equate what women go through versus what gay men go through, right? We're still men at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And even the most feminine of us, a lot of the time, can still receive some form of privilege in the fact that you're a man versus a woman.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very important distinction to keep in mind. Yeah. But gay men historically have shared a lot of similar issues, struggles, problems that women do as well. And I think that's why women and gay men have always sort of attracted each other in terms of finding solace, solace between us, is that we have experienced some similarities in our struggles.
There's that double standard, right? Like women get a lot more harshly judged for their body.
Well, let's not discount also the fact that straight men do, in fact, also deal with a lot of body image issues. And of course, a lot of that comes from media, social media, Hollywood.
Yeah.
I don't always know that gay men experience the same level of media-driven issues that maybe straight men do, since we're not catered to as much.
That's a huge point, actually. I will say that. That makes a lot of sense.
It's something that I've seen, at least, anyways. Yeah. I don't feel that I am directly targeted by media or ads because I'm gay, so I don't really necessarily fit into what they are specifically looking at. But straight men too very much deal with body image issues, and sometimes it can be even more insidious because women have now, thank God, a lot of support from the rest of the world for accepting their bodies. Men, I don't think in general have that same level of acceptance for that particular issue.
Right. And I think that's because it's just not touched upon with men as much as with women. So, sadly.
Yeah. And I think it's seen as weak, right? It always falls back to sort of that toxic masculinity of like, if I am experiencing mental health issues, if I'm experiencing body image issues, if I have an eating disorder, any of those things, right, they're considered weak, they're considered feminine, and I think that it's very important that we continue to have these discussions, so that we do bring all of the people, gay, straight, whatever you want to say, together in this particular issue and say, let's address this holistically, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that's also too, like, we kind of touched on it. Men are very visual, sexually. That's a thing. And so what's interesting is that, not with everyone, but for a lot of times, a lot of men are attracted to like a certain type of body, and then they want to have that type of body. And so there's that kind of mind fuck, so to speak, where that happens.
Yeah, I mean that was literally what I was thinking, is what a mind fuck it is that in this community specifically we desire to not only have the body type that we're attracted to, but to obtain it.
Have yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And I meant as in I want to obtain this other person, but I also want to obtain that person's look myself.
Yeah.
And incorporate it. And that's not something that you really see in other communities.
No. And I mean, not everyone and every couple is like interested in the same type of guy as themselves. But I know from my experience that tended to be true. I know when I was first sort of figuring things out and coming out, and I mentioned it in my coming out story, I tended to be attracted to certain guys that I at first thought was envy because they had a certain body type or a body feature that I wish I had, and that sort of confused me. But ultimately, that is a form of comparison, and comparison when it comes to body image can definitely lead to body dysmorphia, especially when you're comparing yourself nowadays to maybe someone you see on Instagram or a friend or something like that. it can very much feel, I know in the gay community too, sometimes almost like a competition where you want to look the best because you're competing. It's silly, but it's true. And all of that and all of these things sort of factor into us reflecting on our own bodies and a lot of times feeling like we're not good enough, and then therefore affecting how we think about our bodies and then adding to and contributing to our body dysmorphia issues, essentially.
And I think that calls back to a previous point I made of that the way in which we are targeted with media and such that make us feel this way isn't the same, right? It's almost like more catered. It's more specific because a lot of times we're looking to like porn actors or we're looking at
Definitely.
we're looking at people on social media that are, Instagram famous or something. Again, I think men are harder on themselves than people might assume in terms of body image issues, but gay men especially. And of course, I look at it through the lens of the bear community since that's what I've been a part of for so long. And yeah, I mean, it's very difficult when these communities now have become all about the physicality, right? Like the bear community originally was born out as a counterculture to the young, thin, twink. Lithe. Became the twink community, and they were celebrated for being larger in a sense because that extra weight that they carried kind of, I guess, let people know that they weren't sick. And it was also, I don't want to shave my body. I don't want to work out 8 hours a day, and eat nothing but salads. Obviously generalizing, but
no, I get what you're saying. Going against the grain of traditional looks in homosexual culture,
right? And now I think most of us in the bear community can probably come together and agree that the community itself has really become sort of what it stood against initially, and that's not something that. I'm not saying this is like some, oh my God, wow, no one's ever said this kind of thing before.
No, we've all said it. Yeah, we've addressed a little bit in my first episode with my friend Joe. There's sort of that sort of hierarchical culture coming in with those that have a certain type of body. I would say more like the muscle guys tend to be
right. But who created that hierarchy? We did.
Yeah,
we created that hierarchy. We are so dead set on self-oppression. We're so dead set on continuing to adopt the labels and the compartmentalization that the rest of the gay community and even the broader straight community does as well. We like to put ourselves in boxes. We like to categorize ourselves because it's easier.
It's easier,
right? You don't have to think about it. And also, from what I've seen, I think it allows other gay men to not have to practice empathy near as much, right? It's much easier to disconnect and not try to understand another person because they don't look the way that the community wants them to look. It's easy to sweep those people under the rug because they don't fit in with the community.
Well, it kind of goes, I've talked about this with some people too, where people are trying to make more of an effort to be friends and like people that they aren't attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? So,
yes, absolutely.
There tends to be people that you will notice, you'll give more attention to or want to be friends with and want to be around because you find them attractive.
Of course. I think we've all been a little bit guilty of doing that, even subconsciously.
Sure. And but it ties back into the body preferences and the body, at least with body dysmorphia, turning it back onto yourself. So people always say, hey, Andre, you're cute. Great. But that doesn't mean I don't have my own issues. So I struggled with body dysmorphia for years. I still do to this day. People will tell me, hey, I really like your belly. I hate it. I hate my belly.
Well, I relate to that.
Yeah. But Jake, since we've been hanging out recently, how many times have I said, oh, some fat guy at the counter, and I'm talking about myself, right?
I called you out about that literally yesterday.
Exactly.
I said, do you realize how often you add the term fat as a negative when you make what I assume you feel at the time are jokes?
Yes, and I'm doing that sort of as a way to compensate for my pain of guilt of having it.
Sure.
You know, like,
Yeah.
I don't like that about myself.
Which is insane when you think about it, because the very community, right? It's supposed to be all about loving and accepting bigger bodies. But why don't so many of us love and accept our bigger bodies in a community that is supposed to love and accept bigger bodies?
Correct. It's because you're still in a society where that's not the norm. You're still being told, be healthy by your doctor. You know, and well, healthy is a different topic we can talk about later. But like, you're still told, hey, be a certain look, be a certain way by external stimuli that then you're told by your community, you know, hey, you look great.
So it's a disconnect. It's a cognitive dissonance almost.
So I remember I was 350 pounds in 2018-19. I was the largest I've ever been. But I was go-go dancing. I mean, you don't think of go-go dancers being like 350 pounds. You think of them being like muscle guys, right? Like, especially if you're new to the gay community. Typically, right? And people would say, oh, Andre, will you hold it well? Or, oh, you're stocky, or, oh, like, whatever. But, like, I let that get to me and be like, oh, well, I can push worrying about my body. Or, like, I would just let people kind of let me... I don't know. I use that as an excuse to kind of, like, get over my body dysmorphia in a way. Like, oh...
But it wasn't really...
It wasn't getting over it. Not the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, help deal with it, I guess. Like... Hey, people were telling me I'm cute, it's letting me feel better.
It was a Band-Aid. It
was a Band-Aid. And that's kind of where I was trying to post more thirst traps and trying to get more attention. It was just to make myself feel better, because deep down I was really feeling like shit and really guilty. And it was because of those things. Like, if you had asked me, what do you hate the most? It was my belly. It was the fact that I was, you know, my cheeks were getting bigger. Like, all those sort of things. Like, those are the things that were bothering me. And, that contributes to what I feel like I have now, which is major body dysmorphia. Like, I lost a bunch of weight, and I still feel like gross. And people will be like, "Oh no, you look great," and I'm like, "No."
Well, right there, that's something I did want to make sure that I brought up when we sat down and decided to have a discussion about this topic.
Yeah.
Because I certainly, anybody that does know me knows that I've dealt with this pretty severely most of my life, right? And I wanted to say, you know, some people might ask, like, okay, well, if somebody's feeling that way, like, how do I address that for them? How do I help them? And the best thing that I can say, I think the number one mistake that people make where they think that they're helping, they think that what they're saying is going to sort of allay the pain and the anxiety, is saying, oh, no, you're not. You're fine. You look great. You look handsome.
Right.
You look sexy. You look great.
I never bought that when people told me that.
Here's the thing, right? So I deal with really severe social anxiety disorder. I deal with body dysmorphia issues, right? And we're aware that it's irrational. You know that the thought is irrational. You know that how you're feeling isn't logically the truth. But all that's doing when someone says, no, you look great, we that's the problem. It's this very cyclical, very sort of like sick cycle that we go through in our heads of, like, we know that it's not real, but we also can't accept that it's not real,
right?
Because our minds literally will not let you say, I'm okay, I look great, whatever, and all it does is it reinforces the irrational side. It reinforces that. It makes that stronger. And like, we know, like, I know, but I don't know how to respond to that. What am I? Because if I say, oh, okay, yeah, no, you're right, I do look good, well, then comes the feeling of arrogance and narcissism. Well, if I admit that I look good, well, then people are going to think that I'm narcissistic. Now they're going to think I'm arrogant. Now they're going to think I'm an asshole.
Right.
And it's a catch-22. You can't win. And I understand people want to help, but that's not the way to do it.
What would be your best suggestion and way to help?
I mean, I think the best thing, just like I said before, is empathy, right? Understand and relate to that person. Maybe try to change the conversation, but if you can't, say, hey, I know you're feeling this way about yourself. I understand that you're feeling this way about yourself. You know that's irrational, right?
Okay.
Yes, I know that's irrational. Okay, do you want to go somewhere else until you feel better?
Okay.
Do you want to talk about something else?
Yeah.
You know, being supportive without trying to... It's almost an unintentional discount of the way that person is feeling at that moment. It's the same thing with anxiety. It's the same thing with depression. And I think a lot of people that deal with those things can probably relate to what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I think that is a nice way. If someone said, you said that to me yesterday, and called me out on it after we had lunch, and I was like, yeah, I did feel better. I know for me, so goal setting, right, and self-affirmations help to a point, but kind of like you said, I still have that voice in my head that sort of blocks that self-affirmation where I'm like, oh no, I feel good today, or body positivity. I might have another voice that says, no, you're still fat, or something. And so fighting against that is tricky. But with goals, like when I was on a really good workout kick, I at least was getting those endorphins and feeling good, and felt like, all right, maybe I'm not the perfect body I want, but I'm taking steps in the right direction. And so anytime I started feeling like, oh shit, I hate what I look like, I was able to go, will you try today? And you were working hard today. And that little bit was huge. Yeah, I made a step in the right direction. I ate a little bit better today. I worked out a little bit harder today. Now, that could turn into a whole other obsession. And I've seen guys who work out maybe excessively too much to overcompensate.
Sure.
It's a different story.
Yeah, muscle dysmorphia.
Absolutely.
That's certainly a piece of the puzzle that is body dysmorphia.
Absolutely. But I've noticed for me, at least, like starting there has been good. So yeah, getting the empathy from friends, but at least with yourself, going out there and going, okay, maybe work on some of those things that you have some dysmorphia on, and taking it into your own hands a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big believer that the best way to make that change is to do it yourself, right? Like nobody can fix body dysmorphia for you, and you can't probably fully fix body dysmorphia yourself, right? It's something that you live with.
No, yeah, it's going to be something that, I mean, you can always go see a therapist, right?
Sure.
But it is something that you're just going to, like you said, you'll have to live with. So it's more dealing with finding ways to and methods to handle and deal with the dysmorphia on a daily basis, so that it doesn't cripple you, it doesn't depress you, it helps you something you can have and handle. Exactly. I do want to touch on the muscle dysmorphia. So, and also the fact that body dysmorphia, I know me and you struggle with fat weight, but there's also guys that have the reverse, which is they're skinny and want to be bigger, or they're muscular already, but they want to be more muscular. So it's not always just about fat to thin. It could be different directions with that. Sure. It's your body in general. You're just unhappy.
That's why we have
your body,
the gainer community.
Exactly. But it's just like your body. You're just unhappy with whatever size it is currently. But there is, like, I've heard some bears be sort of disgruntled with the muscle bears that come in because they work out all the time. They have some of those bodies that they wish maybe they want or they appreciate. And then, like you said, there's that hierarchical issue. But even those guys have muscle dysmorphia. And I know that you are a former powerlifter and you've worked out with one of those guys. Strongman powerlifting, yeah. And you know a lot about that side of it. So can you tell me, like, what goes on with that side when it comes to the muscle guys and lifting?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first off, let me just preface this by saying that I never saw myself really as quote unquote a muscle bear, whatever that might be, or whatever the qualifications are, the minimum requirements. Yes, for a long time in my 20s, I had a goal in mind of becoming the first openly gay strongman that was a pro, and then unfortunately Rob Kearney beat me to it. But I have a lot of experience in the community, but I'm not a professional. I'm not a trainer or anything like that. This is a complex issue, right? So
Huge.
It's not just muscle bear versus chubby bear or whatever. I don't want to make the mistake of oversimplifying what is a more complex issue with hierarchy and how we label ourselves, right, and how we enforce hierarchy upon ourselves. I think, sure, one of the issues is jealousy. I'm sure, right? This guy, oh, he must have it so easy. He must have it so easy. It must come so easy to him because he looks like that. He looks great. He's got a ton of muscle. He's got the body type I always wanted, but I couldn't get there. But I think thinking of it in terms of that's it is too simple. I think a lot of muscle bears maybe are misunderstood. Most of them that I know are rather introverted. Right? They're very just sort of focused on themselves, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, of course, there are plenty of muscle guys, both in the bear community and elsewhere, that are assholes. There's a lot of chubby bears out there that are assholes.
It's just people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are just assholes. That's just how it is. I think that it's dangerous to categorize like any person. I actually did experience this some when I was at my peak with training. I started to get treated kind of differently than I had before. Sort of an assumption that I was going to be a jerk to somebody, so they didn't even bother talking to me.
Oh, like a negative.
Yeah, it was a projection, an assumption that I was going to be shitty towards them, so they didn't even try. And then if someone, asked about me or anything like that, you go, oh yeah, he's a jerk, he's an asshole. But you've never met me. You've never talked to me before. You don't know me. What do you mean?
Wow, that's a huge level of bias right there.
And that's the point that I'm getting at, the larger level of bias, right? I can relate my experience, but let's be honest, like, nobody is all mean, all good, all bad.
Of course. Yeah.
People are layered, people are complicated, people are complex. One of my favorite sort of adages, I guess you could say, that I think relates here is that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So many of us, regardless of physicality, we hurt. We're in pain. We went through traumatic experiences. We went through unimaginable, sometimes, experiences. And it is very difficult to fix that within us, to function well with that in us. Some people do a much better job than others. I think sometimes body dysmorphia is actually more than sometimes. I think a lot of the times body dysmorphia is born out of trauma and disappointment and abandonment and rejection, and all of those things that make up, unfortunately, so much of our community. The community is so deeply rooted in pain.
Yeah.
And I think that manifests in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it manifests in being obsessed with your physicality,
yeah,
and trying to reach some impossible pinnacle standard with your body,
yeah,
that you're never going to reach. And that could be thin, that could be fat, that could be muscle, that could be anything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I will always preach, at least attempting to understand someone else's experiences. It may be very difficult for you as a listener out there to relate, if you're not, to relate to somebody that is super muscular. Maybe you feel like they're just in a completely different class of people, a different species. You could never understand them. You could never do what they do. I don't get it, so I'm not even going to try. And let's be real, a lot of those muscle guys do the same thing because they feel like they don't have to, right? They get everything, or at least it's perceived that they get everything handed to them, so they don't have to try.
Yeah. Back to your story, when you said you're being treated differently, I actually assumed that it was people were being nicer to you.
Oh, absolutely not.
Story was,
absolutely not. Not at all.
I see it now that you said it.
Yeah.
But I honestly was like, oh, people are probably being more flirtatious or like letting him get away with things.
I'm not a person who really tries to test the boundaries of getting away with things to begin with.
No, but like that just tells me my own bias, right? That
right.
People have it a certain way or something.
Sure, a lot
but
of
that's
them
my
do.
body dysmorphia issue. What I want
Yeah.
versus what I have versus what I think. Not all, relate.
I know that some of that was born out of people saw that I had ambition and motivation and drive for something, and I think I became a bit of a mirror for people.
Okay.
I think that they saw somebody who had been just sort of like a fat, chubby dude, really put in a lot of work for a goal, right? And I think a lot of them, too, assumed that I was doing it so that I would be seen as more attractive in the community, but I could have cared less.
No, it was your own goal, your own dream.
It wasn't
to
about
be
that.
powerlifter.
Yeah, well,
Strongman.
Strongman, yeah. That's okay, you'll get it. But yeah, I'm sure there was definitely people that were nicer, but I was always very keenly aware that they were being nice for one specific reason, and it wasn't because they liked me or my personality or who I was as a person or the charitable things I had done. It was because I had a certain level of muscle mass, and that was it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
sure, were some people nicer? Yes, but to a point.
So you touched on it earlier, but as a community, because you mentioned it as an individual, how we can be supportive, but how can we as a community be more supportive in general?
I mean, I'd say one of the biggest things is we've got to stop cannibalizing each other, right? We've got to stop tearing each other down to make ourselves feel good. One of the best things my father ever said was that there are two ways that you could be, or there's two ways you could build the tallest building. One is to just build the building taller than everybody else, but that requires a ton of work.
Yeah.
The easier method is to tear all the other buildings around you until you're the only one left. And I think that's so prevalent in this community that we are so we're in so much pain and hurt and distress that it almost makes us like physically ill or violent sometimes when we see other people in the community that are being successful or that we perceive them as achieving something we wanted.
Yeah. That's insecurity.
Of course.
Completely. You can see that without just being in the gay community too. People are like that in general, sadly. But we need to do better about, just being nicer, checking yourself too, and being like, wait, if I'm jealous or angry at this person, why? Right? Being a little bit more self-reflective.
Our community now, it's all about like, let's cancel each other. Let's spill the tea. Where's the drama? Let's, what did she do this time? Like, oh shit, she's messy. Like,
Well, that's because we want to look better than them.
I mean, that's part of it.
It is.
It's our culture now.
This guy's messy. Oh, well, he's not attractive anymore, and I feel better now. Like,
sure,
it's shitty, but
exactly, the failings of others make us feel better. And I mean, look at YouTube. Look at RuPaul's Drag Race. Look at any of it, right? We have all of these drama channels that go over the hatred on Twitter, the people, coming for somebody because something that they said was perceived a certain way, and because it was perceived that way, well, that must mean that that's how they feel, and let's attack them. We're so hell-bent on tearing ourselves apart from the inside that I think it's going to take a lot of effort from a lot of people to step away from that and go, no, you know what? I would rather raise people up, regardless of whether or not I might be jealous of them, regardless of whether or not they make me feel insecure. They're still a person.
Yes.
They're still worthy of love and praise and acceptance and support. Everybody in this community is.
I agree with you, and I try to practice that myself. It's part of the reason why I've always been inclusive with people in groups, always respond to people online, because they're people that, they have feelings just like I do. They've got emotions.
Exactly.
When it comes to the future, right, what do you hope for?
Like for the community?
For the community, for body dysmorphia, what would you, if maybe a wish or something maybe you can see, maybe not next year, but 20 years, 30 years, what would you like to see in the future when it comes to handling body dysmorphia and how that goes into the future?
Sure. I mean, I hope that over time we realize that it's not a joke, right? And it's not something that's minor. It's a serious condition. It's a condition that a lot of times needs therapy to deal with. And I think that will happen over time as therapy becomes more acceptable and talked about and open in the community. As I've already seen, the mental health awareness becoming so much more important to talk about,
which is a good thing.
Yes, sure. and accepting to talk about that, to be open about that, and to understand where people are coming from when they see that, and to not discount how they feel just because you think they're attractive or you think that they have something great, right? That doesn't mean that that person can't feel that way.
Sure.
And overall, I hope for more understanding and empathy and support for each other, not just the people you want to have sex with.
Yeah. And when it comes to body dysmorphia too, having better ways as a society for, like you said, support, and for us to learn just naturally how to be more body positive and self-accepting and self-loving. Body dysmorphia is so ubiquitous. It's very common. And for anyone that's listening, this is why I'm doing this podcast, is for this exact reason. I want people to realize that they aren't alone in these feelings. And no matter who you think you see on Instagram or on Facebook or in person at the bar, like you were saying, like, we all deal with it to some degree, and especially so much in the gay community. So if you're ever feeling low or feeling those things, definitely have someone to reach out to could be that support. You can reach out to me if you'd like. That's the whole idea of this, is we wanted to talk about how body dysmorphia is impacting each other in the community and what exactly it is. So with that, Jake, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to say on the topic?
Sure. I've read a couple of books that I think helped me come to understand why we as a community operate the way that we do. One was The Velvet Rage. Yes. By I think it's Alan Downs. I think that's his name.
I'm going to pause really quick and say, if you haven't read The Velvet Rage, stop what you're doing right now and go buy it, and then listen to it, or read it. I listen to it in my car, but it is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely from the point of view of somebody that is just gendered and white. I think it misses some of the points that could be expanded upon to help trans people or people of color. But it's a great book overall. Another one would be The Body Keeps the Score, and that is by Bessel van der Kolk. And that's a great book that discusses how trauma can physically rewire your body to think and feel and act differently. And it definitely helps to tie in with this. So those two books I would say are great reading if you're more interested in finding out sort of root causes for why people go through this.
Yeah. And I think maybe if you feel this way, maybe those books can highlight some things you didn't think about for yourself, which can be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jake. It's been great talking to you about this. I know this is a fairly heavy topic, but it's something that we both relate to, and I really can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this with me.
Of course, yeah. I was happy to do it.
Yeah. So thank you, Jake. And for those listening, thank you so much for listening to The Bear Share Show. Please feel free to follow The Bear Share Show on Spotify and Apple Music or wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. And then feel free to follow The Bear Share Show on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you very much, Jake Briscoe, for everything. You are amazing. And
thank you.
I hope to maybe do another episode with you sometime.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, all right, everyone. Thanks for listening to The Bear Share Show, and have a great day.